Have you ever wondered what people did before they became a garden consultant? No? Well, today I'm going to tell you what I did before I became a garden consultant, and then I'm going to introduce you to some of our fabulous gardenary consultants so you can hear what they did too. So garden consulting, I've done videos out there and said this is like a new industry, and I got yelled at on the internet. So I'm not going to say this is a new industry, but I will say this is an up and coming industry. And when I started in 2015, I had no idea this was a thing. So I knew there were landscape designers and landscape architects. I knew there were landscapers. I knew there were people who did like lawn mowing, right? And I knew there were people who would like design planting beds, etc. But I didn't know there was such a thing where your main goal, your main service is consulting. So your main job is literally telling people what to do in the garden. That was a new idea for me. My best friend, she wasn't my best friend, she was a good friend. Hello, Teresa. I was a homeschooling mom. That's one thing I was beforehand. So I'd been homeschooling, and she was a fellow homeschooling mom. And I gave her a call, and I said, I want to start this business. I think I want to sell things from my garden. And she said, Nicole, I hate to break it to you, but I don't want to buy things from your garden. She was like, but I would love for you to teach me how to have a garden like you. She's like, how about something like garden consulting, something like that? And it was a light bulb moment for me. Like, first of all, the relief to know that I didn't have to like harvest stuff from my garden, wash it, and try to sell it, right? That was a huge relief that was not going to be the way I was going to make money. But also just her talking about the idea of me going to her space, talking with her for an hour and teaching her what I knew from the garden, that sounded like a dream job to me, a dream business to me. And so anyway, I thought literally I came up with the idea or Teresa came up with the idea, because this wasn't on the list in high school. You know what I mean? Like when I went to career services in college, they didn't say, oh, Nicole, you should be a garden consultant. Like that wasn't even on the list of 500 careers. So anyway, I thought I invented it or Teresa invented it, but turns out it's been around for a while, maybe for a long time, but it's definitely growing right now. And a lot of that is because of me. Because once I figured this out in 2015 and grew my own business to 6 figures and beyond, I was like, this is too good to be true. I got to tell all the other gardeners. And so in 2017, I started a gardenary consultant certification program where I certify gardeners around the country, across the world, to start businesses just like this for themselves. To date, we've had over 1,000 gardeners go through the program, and we've had hundreds of gardeners have tons of success. They have businesses that are over 5 years old that they started with me, and many of them have businesses that make that make 5 figures and 6 figures. Some are even on their way to their 7-figure year. So all that to say, garden consulting is definitely a thing, and it is on the rise. And part of that is because we missed several generations of gardening, especially in the US and in the West. So back, if it was 100 years ago, there'd be no need for a garden consultant because everyone knew how to garden at that time, right? You can go back, it may take several generations, but 2-3 generations ago, someone in your family knew how to grow their own food. But over the last decades, the last century, we've lost that ability for the majority of the population. I know myself included. My grandfather actually was a professor of horticulture, and yet I grew up not knowing one single thing about where my food came from or how to grow any of my own food. And so 99% of people in your town or city are in the same boat. They have no idea where their food comes from, how it's grown, and they definitely don't know how to grow it themselves. And that's why they would hire a garden consultant, because they want to learn how to do that. They want to keep their iPhones and stay in the 21st century, but they want to bring back that value of having a little bit of food that they grow themselves at home, and you're the one who can teach them. So all that to say, what did I do before I started doing this full-time as a garden consultant? So I mentioned I was a homeschooler. Way back when I graduated from college, I graduated with a degree in math and accounting, all right? And then I had like a life crisis right around the time I was graduating, and I had a job offer to be an accountant with one of the it was Big Five at that time in Charlotte, North Carolina. And I turned it down, and instead I went across the world and I lived overseas for 2 years in a very rural area and worked with a minority population. So yeah, like I said, I was having a little bit of a crisis that my life wasn't going to matter and I was just going to be an accountant for the rest of my life. So I did that for 2 years, and that was the hardest 2 years of my life. I don't think I helped them at all, but I definitely learned a lot and saw the world. So I'm very thankful for that. Came back to the US and I worked in philanthropy. So I worked with a company that serves high net worth individuals and would manage charities around the world. So I worked in that area for about 3 or 4, maybe even 5 years. During that time, I had my kids. So I had 4 children in 4.5 years. So I started that career in philanthropy. I worked like 2 or 3 years full time, had my children, and did it part time. And so fast forward to 2015, my youngest was 3, just about to enter preschool, and I had been homeschooling my kids while I was also doing this part-time philanthropy work. And so fast forward to that fall of 2015, I raised the white flag and said, homeschooling is not for me. I can't do this anymore. So I sent all 4 of my kids to school that year and started looking for work. I started to try to figure out how I was going to re-enter the workforce. I was still doing contract work for the philanthropy business, but I was looking for a way to make a living and to get back into the workforce, but I also needed time flexibility. I had 4 kids. My youngest was only going to be in preschool from 8 to 12 every weekday, and so I was looking for something that I could do where I could drop them off, do some work, go pick up my youngest, do a little bit more work in the afternoon, pick everyone up and be done by 3 p.m. And I don't know if you've been on the job market lately, maybe it's changed since 2015, but at that time, I couldn't find a single company that wanted to hire me to work those hours. And so I decided I was just gonna have to come up with something myself. Then I had that phone call with Teresa. She said, don't sell me the stuff from your garden, be a garden consultant, and boom, here we are. So that's the shortened version of my story, how I became a garden consultant, what I was doing before I started. Now I want to introduce you to some of the most fabulous human beings, some gardenary consultants from around the country, and they're going to tell you what they were doing before they became garden consultants too.
Before I became a garden consultant, I was working a corporate job, which was very wonderful, but a little bit unfulfilling. And I really loved the time that I spent in the garden, and honestly ended up relying on the garden more and more to relax and decompress after a stressful day at work. So I wanted to find a way to be able to kind of share that feeling with other people. And I was noticing that some of my friends as well were trying to get into gardening, but weren't doing very well at it, and were making a lot of the same mistakes that I had made a couple years before. So I thought that if there was a way that I could get them to be able to progress past those mistakes faster and kind of in a more official way so that they listen to me, that would be amazing.
I was in academia studying biomedical sciences, inflammation, human health and disease. And at the same time, it was a very stressful career. And I actually turned to gardening to help me handle the stress of everyday life. And that turned into using plants as medicine and gardens as therapy.
It's similar but different. It's actually cybersecurity consulting. So I've been consulting for the past 6 years. Ever since I graduated from college, I've been working in a professional services firm doing cybersecurity consulting. So helping very large companies, solve different IT and cybersecurity issues and stay in compliance with, different rules and regulations. So what made me make the decision to become a consultant, I would say just kind of my experience doing cybersecurity consulting, it felt like a natural transition. Just working with clients and helping them solve their problems instead of solving, IT and cybersecurity problems. I would just be solving, food and, gardening problems, right? Pest problems and things like that. So it just seemed a lot more, it seemed like a natural transition, but to a much more interesting and I think rewarding career. I mean, cybersecurity is very, can be very rewarding, and it's super, I guess, cool and helpful and important. But growing your own food just to me felt like it had more of an impact, at least on an individual level.
My focus will be on kitchen gardens, but within that, I really want to kind of lean into working with early childhood. That's been my background and my specialty for years, and want to work with moms and preschoolers, both on that whole concept of that farm to table and where does food come from, because I don't think kids know. And I believe that the more kids are involved in the garden and growing their food, the more vegetables they'll try instead of turning up their noses to those icky green things on their plate. So I want to be able to do that. And then, having recently retired, I know the importance of having a quality hobby for people as they're aging that feeds not only their body physically, nutritionally, but feeds their soul.
I graduated from NC State with a degree in landscape architecture, a master's, and so I came to St. Louis and was a residential gardener for 20 years and found the garden consultant program actually on the internet, and I said, this looks really cool and would be a great side business.
I've pretty much done a 180 in my career with garden consulting, but it's still in my wheelhouse in terms of marketing and helping people find solutions to their problems and making things happen in a way that makes everybody happy.
Up until becoming a garden consultant, I had been working in the hospitality industry, serving farm to table food. I was really passionate about that. And it was really important to me to support local farmers and to make that connection. And in that, I started growing a lot of my own food. And I always thought that I would go into the food and bev industry. But then I found Nicole and was like, oh, this is cool. I always knew I'd be an entrepreneur, but I didn't know exactly what that would look like. So when I went through Gardenary, it just all started clicking. Yeah.
Before becoming a garden consultant, I started off working in a plant nursery when I was younger. I lived in Morocco and in Italy, and in Morocco I was working with working in an agricultural community, and I really loved that experience, and I've always found a way to weave gardening into my life. And I ended up becoming a stay-at-home mom with my 2 young girls, which was a really beautiful experience. And gardening really helped pull me through those early days. It helped pull me through COVID. We were just outside, growing our own food. And I noticed the impact that it had on our emotional health and our well-being. And people started to notice what I was doing, and they said, hey, can you teach me? It seems like you know what's going on. And the rest has been history.
I have a long background in landscaping, and I'm a horticulturist. I actually went to school for plant science way back in the day and ended up in corporate finance. So I have a corporate career. Just through a turn of events and the way life goes, things changed, my course changed. I always wanted to come back to gardening and work more with people in gardening. I found a lot of joy when I was working and helping people design their landscapes. I should back up and say, while I was raising my kids, and while I was building my corporate career to support my family, I kept doing little landscape jobs on the side. And I sometimes would work with friends, and friends began knowing that I knew a lot about plants. So sometimes they would just call me and text me and ask me questions about their gardens. And so I found a lot of joy in that. And I also always had plants of my own. Even if I lived in a small space, I would have house plants or plants out on the patio just to kind of give myself a green space to go relax and de-stress.
I am actually a retired surgical neurophysiologist. I know that's big words, but basically, my professional career consisted of sitting in the operating room for 18 hours a day, cold, wrapped up in a blanket, working these surgical cases. And it was very high stress, and it was exhausting. And I burned out of that very, very quickly. And my husband and I kind of had a conversation, and he said, look, you cannot do this forever. This is way too much. It's taxing, and I can tell. And so for the next 10 years, we moved all over the country. with his work while I was retired. And I ran an Etsy business during that time because it was easy. I could take it from state to state. But really what I was doing in that time is cultivating and tending a garden in Chicago, a garden in Southeast Florida, a garden in Arizona, and picking up and learning these skills along the way that now have culminated in this business that I was able to put together where, you know, I've grown in 6 different zones across the country. And if I don't have an answer for you, it's probably gonna be hard to find one.
When I first started my business, my focus was on teaching. I've taught hundreds of students in the Chattanooga area how to grow their own fresh vegetables. I've been a nurse for over 42 years and I recently retired, but I've had gardens for much longer than that. So when I decided I was going to retire, I knew that I wouldn't be happy just sitting at home, and I thought it would be an opportunity to use my love of gardening to help other people learn how to garden. So for several years I've been teaching classes, so it just naturally progressed to becoming a business for me.
All right, are you impressed with these backgrounds? It is crazy to me to meet all of these garden consultants and hear the lives that they lived before they dedicated their life to the garden. Attorneys and flight attendants and high school teachers and scientists and archaeologists and nurses, fashion designers. I mean, the list goes on. The main takeaway I would love for you to get from this video is that you can be anything before you become a garden consultant. In fact, the more varied your background, the more diverse, I think the better, because the clients you're going to be working with as a garden consultant, these are people who don't garden for a living. These are people who didn't grow up on a farm. These are people who are pretty far removed from a garden to table experience. And so when they get to know you and they know that you were balancing, you know, all different kinds of things in your life, that you had a different career, that you worked in a different area, and yet you also gardened, this enlightens them. This wakes them up and shows them the possibility for their own life, that they can be a busy mom, they can be a busy professional, they can be a business owner, they can be young, they can be old, they can be someone with family, they can be someone alone, they can be anyone, maintain all those other parts of their character and their personality in their life and still have a garden. And that's what I get from listening to all these garden consultants. It's so beautiful to realize that all these people had such varied backgrounds and experiences, and yet they all found a way to the garden. And that's because I think we're just meant to garden. It's just should be part of the human experience. And they have proven that with their lives, and you are definitely proving that with your life too. So if this inspires you, if you realize, oh my goodness, my background is perfect for setting me up to become a garden consultant, then you should check out Gardenary's certification program. We start with a kickstart. This is a week-long live event where I teach you all about the garden consulting industry and help you see if it's a fit for you. You can find out more about the kickstart and how to get started as a garden consultant right below this video, or head to gardenary.com. Thanks so much for watching, and thanks to our hundreds of garden consultants who inspire me and so many others every day.